Greetings, everyone. You know, every Sunday here in the parish, we do what we call Bible study at 2 p.m. And it's on Zoom, but also in person. It's kind of like a hybrid course now. And what we do is we study one of the books of the Bible in depth. And this semester is going to be the book of Exodus. Actually, we started last Sunday already. So what we wanted to do is just a little video clip every week to introduce you to where we are in the study of the book of Exodus, since it's situated, and to give a little rundown on the subject of the day. The book of Exodus is the second book of the whole Bible, and it describes the exodus, or the exit of the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt to the promised land. It's one of the most iconic books in the Old Testament, and movies have been made about it. But anyway, the title of our course is Call to Freedom. And it's quite an obvious title because they were called out of slavery to freedom. But actually, when you look at the book, it's much more than that. A lot of the movies you've seen portrayed over the years describe really well the political and geographical journey to freedom. But actually, it is that, but it's actually much more than just political freedom. It's an inner freedom to commune with God, the freedom to love God. And that's what this whole book is about, is getting to a place and making the sacrifices and allowing God to have a larger space in our lives. One of the most important things to get right when you read the book of Exodus is to have some background when it comes to who are the Egyptians and what is Egypt. Because Egypt is one of the most ancient and sophisticated cultures in the world. And by the time Moses came around, the Egyptian empire or nation state was around already for 2,000 years. Can you imagine? 2 millennia. And the pyramids were already 1,000 years old. You can imagine Moses taking a selfie next to the pyramids. And to know that Egypt is the first nation state in history. Up to then we had like different tribal groups, but never before had so many tribal groups come together under one nation and one leader. And there are three pillars to the Egyptian society. So we learn. You have the pharaohs, you have the military, and you have the priesthood. And a bit like, I suppose, like in American politics, you have like the executive branch and the legislative branch and the judicial branch. They kind of like kept each other in check. And that's why relatively over 3 millennia, there were very few corrupt pharaohs, because the caste of the priesthood and the military, which were basically a professional military, kept each other in check. So once you understand the power and the influence of Egyptian culture and of its religion, because temples were omnipresent and they were sumptuous and the liturgies were amazing and the priesthood had a powerful influence on people. So these Israelite people were there for almost half a millennia, almost 500 years. And they had forgotten their culture. They had become Egyptian in the way they eat, and they walked like an Egyptian even. And, that's really important to know, because the God of Israel was just a faint, like folkloric image. And they had got into this polytheistic world of Egypt. And so what we say is, getting them geographically out of Egypt was easy. But getting Egypt out of them, that's the whole dilemma of the book of Exodus and the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy and the journey to the promised land. In the early part of the Bible called the Torah, the very first line of each book is actually the name of the book. So in the beginning, for example, in Hebrew is Bereshit, and that would have been the name of the book of Genesis. But actually the book of Exodus was called Exodus much later, but originally it was called the book of names, because the very first line of the book of Exodus is, these are the names. And that's important, because if you miss that, you miss the whole theme of the book of Exodus, because it's all about names, and every name is symbolic, and every name is leading up to the name, which is the name of God. Moses' name, for example, as he was found as a baby in a basket in the river Nile by Pharaoh's daughter, Moshe means to be pulled out of the water. And that's what he did. He pulled his people through the Red Sea and into freedom. And so the names, again, are highly symbolic and meaningful. And for the Egyptian people, the priesthood, for example, the name of your God, there was over 80 gods in the Egyptian pantheon. And each god had a name, and each god had a secret name, and only the priest knew the secret name. So when you say to somebody who from Egypt, this is my God, the first question was, what's his name? And that's why Moses at the burning bush, which we'll learn about this week, his very first question is, okay, thank you for revealing yourself to me, but what's your name? Because if I go back to Egypt and I say, I'm speaking to God, their first question will be, what's his name? So join us for today's session when we will discover God revealing his name to Moses and sending Moses forth in what seems like mission impossible to go speak to Pharaoh. And after 40 years in the desert, Moses feels inadequate. So we all know the story of God who reveals his name. I am who I am, Eir, Asher, Eir. But there's a second name that God reveals to Moses as well, simultaneously, which describes two sides to God's being and mission. We will look at that today. And also, finally, the resistance that Moses has. He really is a hesitant servant. And basically he says, please send somebody else. Now that might not be the motto of many churches, please send somebody else, official. But it's actually the unofficial motto of so many churches is, can you send somebody else, please? None of us really want that responsibility, because when God calls, we feel inadequate. And we see this wonderful dialogue between Moses and God and how it matures from chapter 2 and 3, where it's hesitant and reluctant, to chapter 33, I think, where we see Moses and God spoke like a friend speaks to a friend. And that's the journey of the book of Exodus, a journey from an outsider, a kind of a person who is on the outside of their faith, kind of like a superficial faith, and getting to know God better, entering into a dialogue and relationship with him, and all the ups and downs that comes with that, that leads to an intimate and friendship with God, a heart to heart.